Markelle Fultz has the yips. That's one thing I'm certain of. I'm not even a basketball guy, but I am a small participant in the sports media ecosystem, so, you know, I hear things. I'm a baseball guy at heart, and I think Mr. Fultz can learn a lot from baseball's storied history of the yips. But first, let's take a look at Markelle's file, shall we? For those of you not in the know, Markelle Fultz was selected #1 overall by the Philadelphia 76ers in 2017. Since then, his decline in shooting performance has been the talk of the town. I've found evidence of declining free throw percentage between college and the NBA, and perhaps even more damning, I've found fear. He has attempted 14 threes in 30 NBA games, compared to 126 and 25 at the University of Washington. I thought today's NBA was all about the three ball. What gives? Well, you can't do much if you forget how to shoot. One of my informants sent me this clip of a Fultz free throw from just a few nights ago. You ever seen anything like that? Don't think so, kid. The mechanical problems are chronic, too. Check out this jump shot from last year. Hideous. My own grandmother has better form, even with one foot in the grave. Now, before you think I'm gonna go uncovering some great conspiracy about a motorcycle accident and a botched shoulder, let's slow down here. In my 30 years of being a private eye, I have learned that it ain't like the movies. The most obvious suspect is usually the one who done it. So that's why I'm going with the yips. His problems are mechanical, but what lies underneath is 100% mental. After all, he's clearly physically capable of performing well. Here's some surveillance footage of his days as a low-level huckster back in Washington. This is the guy who the 76ers thought they were drafting, not some lug who wouldn't know a jump shot from a rim shot. Luckily for him, I have plenty of connections to the game of baseball who have struggled with the yips. Hopefully their stories can help young Markelle get on the right path. Patient 1, Rick Ankiel. Much like Fultz was a #1 draft prospect, Ankiel was a #1 minor league prospect. He pitched great in 2000 for the St. Louis Cardinals as a 21-year-old rookie, but once he reached the playoffs, he fell off the wagon. The young man was suddenly incapable of throwing a strike. What gives? This continued into the following season. His walk rate ballooned from 4.6 walks per 9 to a seemingly impossible 9.4. His pitching career was done shortly after that. On HBO's Real Sports, Mr. Ankiel characterized the yips as a mental prison that he couldn't escape from. Despite numerous self-help books and experts, he couldn't throw strikes. Even more intriguing, Ankiel actually made the majors again in 2007, this time as an outfielder. He put together a mundane, journeyman career, but his time in the outfield gave us a glimpse at the unutilized talent in that sweet, sweet arm of his. Yes, it seems Mr. Ankiel was incapable of throwing strikes from 60 feet out when he was on the mound, yet, when he didn't have time to think about it, he could deliver strikes from the outfield. Just further evidence that Mr. Ankiel's afflictions were purely mental and not from lacking in talent. To summarize his case, old Tricky Ricky's yips came suddenly, ruined his pitching career, but he still kept the arm talent, which tells you a lot about how the yips can grab a hold of some folks. Interestingly enough, both Ankiel and Fultz experienced their yips upon reaching the pros as youngsters. Hopefully Markelle can shake off his demons better than Ankiel. Patient 2, Khris Davis. Unlike Ankiel, Khris Davis is an active big leaguer. In fact, he's a great player, having hit a career-high 48 home runs for the Oakland A's this season. How can a guy who just finished 8th in AL MVP voting still have the yips? Well, like Ankiel, it has to do with throwing baseballs. In his Players Tribune article last year, Davis characterized his yips as a creature which represents all the self-doubt and negative self-talk that arises when he tries to throw from the outfield. Like Ankiel and Fultz, Davis's creature emerged just as his career was burgeoning. After being drafted into the Brewers organization in 2009, Davis recalls suddenly losing his ability to make throws in the outfield during rookie ball that summer, prompting a Brewers front office member to ask what was wrong. he had no answer. The creature followed him to the big leagues. While he could do no wrong with the bat, his throws from the outfield were terrible. He had regressed severely from his college days without explanation. The advanced statistics back this up too. A little birdie called Fangraphs tells me that Davis had a UZR, Ultimate Zone rating, of negative 10.2 in 2017, meaning that his poor defense was responsible for surrendering 10 more runs than the average left fielder. Now, I know what you're thinking. That could just be issues with his range or errors. This is, sadly, not the case, my friends. His arm rating revealed that a whopping negative 9.6 of those runs were related exclusively to his arm woes. Bada bing, bada boom. Case closed. Luckily for Davis, he plays in the American League. The Oakland A's remedied his situation by removing him from the field almost entirely in 2018, as he was their primary designated hitter. He only played 86 innings in the field in 2018, compared to 993 the previous year. Fultz isn't so lucky. As a guard, his shooting woes can't be covered up so easily, but it shows just how the yips can affect players who are otherwise successful in other facets of their game. Patient 3. Mackey Sasser. I was first made aware of this Mackey Sasser character through ESPN's 30 for 30 short titled Fields of Fear, which is fantastic, link in the description. Try the field, yada yada. Sasser was a catcher for the New York Mets who suffered a home plate collision in the 1990 season. His ankles were injured, but the Mets elected not to put him on the disabled list. Instead, they taped him up heavily, effectively giving him club feet. This meant that he wouldn't really get out of his crouch when returning the ball to the pitcher. That's when the bad habits started to flare up, and they would put Mackey in a world of hurt. First came the rocking. Mackey had to rock back and forth like he was on a hobby horse to put up the courage to return the ball. It's actually somewhat reminiscent of Fultz's free throw from earlier. Then came the tapping. Old Mackey was tapping his glove more than a toddler with an iPad. Even when the tape came off, his troubles persisted. At points, he had to stand up and practically hand the ball over to the pitcher. All this for what should be the easiest, most automatic part of the game. Not only did this make him susceptible to runners, it also destroyed the rhythm of his pitchers, with some of them opting to not have Mackey catch their games at all. His days as both a Met and a catcher were soon done after that, and he retired in 1995 after a few brief stints as an outfielder in Seattle and Pittsburgh. Despite visiting upwards of 50 so-called experts, not one tried to dig around Mackey's past in hope of finding the source of his trauma. He had no answers until the 30 for 30 short, which was filmed decades later. In the documentary, two wise guys put Mackey through an experimental form of therapy. I won't spoil it for you all, but they help him come to terms with a childhood traumatic event as he goes through his throwing motion. The end shows him having improved. Now, it may just be the private eye in me, but I'm a bit skeptical that this form of therapy could have saved his catching career. Still, it's good to see him get some closure. It shows that Fultz has some interesting options if it really is just the yips, which we understand as being 100% mental. But that's the question though, the crux of the thing. Is Fultz actively pursuing these options? We know he has been spending a lot of time in the gym retooling his shot, and it's gotten to the point that he and the 76ers skill trainer Drew Hanlon are no longer on speaking terms. So, we know it's not going well. But is he flexing his mental muscles? I interviewed this Google character, you know, down by the docks, but he couldn't find a single instance of Fultz visiting a sports psychologist or mental health professional at all. I don't think it's happened. In baseball, guys exhibiting this sort of behavior will always pursue some form of mental help. In fact, this season, 27 of the 30 MLB teams had a mental skills professional on staff working with the players, and they are even more common in the minor leagues, which feature athletes that are, quite frankly, more in Markelle Fultz's age range to begin with. I'm well aware that there's a flurry of mental evaluations for draft prospects, but are they given the same level of attention once they actually join the NBA? It's quite possible that there is some form of psychotherapy going on behind closed doors for Fultz, and quite frankly, it ain't my business. I'm a PI, not a doctor. I just know that if he were playing a sport like baseball or golf, where the yips are more widely prevalent, he'd have a whole team of shrinks on him in a heartbeat. I can't help but wonder if the 76ers have already given up on the poor sap with the acquisition of this Jimmy Butler character and whatnot. Which leads to our final questions, my fine audience. You know I can't crack this case alone. Should Fultz and the 76ers be pursuing some form of mental health more aggressively? Is there a greater stigma towards mental health in basketball than in other sports? Why or why not? Until then, this has been Foolish Investigations. Thank you for watching.